How are you?
Doing all right, doing all right. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to November 5th's MakerDAO community call. We do these community calls every Tuesday. We've been running like this for a couple or a few years now. But yeah, these are pretty consistently done. It's a great place to catch up on the stuff that's going on in Maker. We typically do like a 1 week review of all the stuff that's been going on, everything from like governance updates, significant metrics about MakerDAO, highlights from the community, partnerships, integrations, real life events, and all that. And every once in a while, and lately it's been more than every once in a while, I've been consistently getting great guests on pretty much every week. But every once in a while we have a guest. And this week we had the launch of a really cool thing. It is a governance analytics dashboard that was built by some of the guys at Protofire. And I actually have on the call today Leo, who's going to be sharing his screen. He's going to demo the dashboard, and it's going to be open for some Q&A. So Leo, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hey, folks. Thank you for inviting me to join this call. Well, as David said, over the last couple of months, our team at Protofire has been working on this new governance dashboard that I'm going to show you today. This came up from a request that we saw on the forums, and we thought it was a very cool idea for us to work on, and we think it's going to be super useful for analyzing all the human behavior that we have on governance. This is the first deep dive we do into governance, so it's super exciting for us. We usually work on DeFi applications, insurance, smart contract side of things, but doing the analytics this time is been super interesting for us.
Cool. So I have a quick question. Was it just some of you guys at Protofire, or were there people outside of Protofire that also helped?
So development is 100% Protofire, and of course we had some input from Rich Brown and Long for Wisdom that helped us figure out what to show on this dashboard, and gave us a lot of feedback for our first version of it.
Right on. First version. I like that. That implies that there's going to be multiple future versions.
Yeah, what I'm going to show you today is the first one, is the current status of development, but we are working on a second version with a lot of improvements, and we hope we get a lot of feedback to include on at the end of the second one, or even a third version. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. So once you share your screen, anybody on the call, feel free to like jump in, stop Leo. Feel free to ask him questions or give feedback, because as you heard, he's looking for it. And also, here's the link to the dashboard if you want to like follow along in your own window.
Okay. Okay, I'm sharing here. So on that link, that's our production build. You can access it. It's open, and of course, all of this is open source, so you can check everything we are doing, and it's all in there. So
it looks very similar to mkr.tools.
Well, we try to keep it like a familiar UI for everybody that will actually immediately see this is Maker.
Yeah,
but yeah, we took some ideas from there as well.
Yeah, hell yeah, I love it, cool.
Okay, so this has three main sections. The main dashboard will show you global statistics, analytics for everything in one place. Then we have an area specific for executive votes and another one for polls. The organization is very similar to the voting dashboard that people uses for voting, of course. On the main page, everything you're going to see is, again, first version. We welcome feedback on everything you see here. And some of the first feedback we've got is we need to explain what everything is. So very soon we will be adding help text to everything here and explaining where we get the data from. Of course, exposing those data sources for people to build other things on top of it.
Right.
Okay, so main dashboard, we start showing the number of voters versus the total maker this staked. Most of the charts, the graphs that where it makes sense, they will have a filter for the amount of time you want to see. And of course, if you want to see it in full screen, some of these will change the scale so you can actually see much more granular data.
So really quickly, most recently, how many MKR number of voters are there? That's the blue line, right?
That's the blue line. We have 384.
And
Now
that's
the data
counting.
here.
That's
This
counting
is
unique
counting.
voters.
Yeah, this is counting the voting contracts and a few different other. I think there's a couple other options for voting that are not exactly voting contracts. We are taking those into account as well.
Got it.
Of course, we have lists for everything, but on the homepage we show the top executive votes and polls. These are the most recent ones, and some of the global metrics. By the way, this screen is going to grow very much on the second version, so we will have to rearrange everything you're seeing. But for now, we have distribution of Maker on executive votes. For example, here on the right, you can see the black one is the current hat, has most of the Maker, and the other ones, for example, there's another big boat that still has a lot of Maker in it, and it's not the current hat.
Yeah. So actually, let me pause right there, and just for like the people that are going to be watching the recording that might not know what a hat is. So in MakerDAO, for the executive votes, it operates under a continuous voting kind of thing, where a proposal has to beat the previous proposal with the most kind of MKR staked in it. And so the current hat is how much any new executive vote has to beat for it to actually be able to be passed. So yeah, just wanted to throw that little explanation in there.
Yeah, thanks. Exactly. We're also showing the amount of time votes take to pass. So for example, most of them will take only 1 day, but there are some that will take up to 27 days. And of course, this will fill up as new executive votes appear, and over time we will see like a clear tendency for what is most usual on all of these charts. What else? Executive votes versus polls. This is just the amount. It's very interesting to me to see how over time we've had a lot more polls than executive votes, but that wasn't the case at the beginning.
Right.
And Maker
So wait,
Gini
how many
coefficient.
total? Sorry to interrupt. How many
Yep.
total votes did we do so far? Something like 60.
So this dashboard is taking into account the new version of the contracts. For the previous one, we are not back processing all the data. We could if the community says that's something they are very interested in, but with the new version of the contracts that we have, we are only processing data from April of this year onwards. So for now, we have 16. Of course, it should be more from before that date. Gini coefficient, I'm being honest, not 100% sure what it does, but I know that it's super important for knowing how the Maker distribution affects the governance.
I'm also a little bit confused by the Gini coefficient.
So this data is updated block by block. So every time you come on to any of these pages, the data will be up to date, but it's not in real time. So if you remain here, data is not updated. You need to refresh it. So for executive votes, we have a whole section, including, of course, the list, and then the details for each one of these. The list shows a lot of important information. The status, the name for those, we have the number, Maker in support, and important dates for each one of them. You will notice that we only have the name for 1 or 2 executive votes. This is because we are leveraging some of the infrastructure, the API that the foundation has available for some of these processing, and we unfortunately don't have the information for for the other ones because the API doesn't have it. We are working on this, and the next version or the following one will include all of this additional data. Anyways, you can access the details for any of these, even though we don't have full information about them. We have all the analytics. We are processing everything that is on chain, and well, the data that is not here, it's not on chain. We need to pull it up. All the
With
lists,
the
they say, yeah,
exception of the old DS Chief before the bug fix, right? Like that's the only on-chain data that's missing, right?
yeah. I mean, we can process it. We decided not to do it for the first version, but it's totally possible. We are just waiting to hear what people think we should spend our time on.
Yeah, hear you. Cool.
Everything you see on these tables, on these lists, can be sorted, of course. For example, making support for these boats, super important, super useful, and dates as well. And we also have filtering here, so in case you want to see only open boats, this is pretty cool. Accessing any of these items will take you to the details. The details have everything you can already see on the boating dashboard application, and
Wow.
some, of course, additional data. The technical details are, well, the basic data that every executive boat has. This description is everything we have on the other app. You can see all the details with all the links. No need to go to the forums or anywhere else to look it up. It's all here, and we have links to the other resources as well, to the GitHub repo with where this is stored, and the forums. And the cool part for us is the analytics. So for executive votes, we have number of voters versus the maker stake by them. Over time, this is showing data from the moment the vote was made available up until now, or the date it was executed, if it's actually vote that passed. For example, here we can see that one voter increased the amount of maker by what, 40,000, something like that. That
Yeah.
really changed the results. And we have related to that the amount of people voting by the distribution of maker people voting. For example, this will tell us that 15 addresses voted with less than one maker, with less than 10 are 16, and the rest, they all have more than 100. And of course, as always, you have the list of top supporters. We have this on the other application as well, but we think it's important to keep it very visible. This page will be a little different if you access an executive vote for which we don't have all the details. Now, we plan to fill this with more information as soon as we figure out how to do it with off-chain data. But for now, you can have all the analytics, all the details for the on-chain data, and we just don't have the text for now. Then we go to polls. Oh, please interrupt me if you want to ask any questions, of course. For polls, we have a lot more data. Now you will notice that this page, and maybe the poll details as well, are a little bit slower than the other ones. We are fine-tuning the amount of resources this requires for processing, and if you feel it's too slow, just let us know. We'll figure it out. We will solve it, even if we need to adjust anything here. Now, this list has the whole information. It's not like the one on the executive votes. And it also has some columns with process data. For the polls that have already finished, we have the winning option. Or actually, we have the winning option for all of them. We will just show the one that is currently winning. A few other processed columns that, of course, will require some help text, and very soon will be there. For example, maker participation is the amount of maker, the total supply of maker that is participating on this poll. sorting by this column will show you 4.31% of all maker participated on this specific poll, which is
Oh,
super
wow,
interesting.
I didn't even know that. That's very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Winning plurality. This shows the amount of the proportion of maker winning that is associated with the winning option. For example, this is a very old poll, test mainnet poll. Everything was put on the winning option, but in most other cases, you will have closest, of course, between 50% and 100%, and not 100% on the winning option.
So I have a quick question.
Mhm.
So, why is it that polls, you're able to have all of this data, like you're able to get it off chain? I mean, get it from on chain, and pull it in, and for the executive votes, you're unable to do that.
Um, um, so we are pulling data from the blockchain. This is what our backend service does, and we are not able to pull off-chain data from the same using the same techniques we have, and we didn't want to include a heavy server component for this first version. This is 100% serverless, so it's very cheap to run it and scale it. And for the polls, we have that data available on our API because it's mostly on chain. We can just fetch the other details from somewhere else. Now, for the executive votes, we are leveraging the same API used for the voting application, and that API will only give us some of the data, and everything else is for us to do. And this is coming, but we didn't have time to implement it for this first version.
Got it.
Okay, so accessing any of these polls will take you to the details. Maybe are some other more interesting polls to show.
Oh, by the way, just
Yeah.
just a point on this one. So the migration risk construct proposal, two polls had gone out because the first one went out with a mistake in it. So we had to axe it really quickly and relaunch. That's why you see two of them yesterday. So just as a point of clarification, why you see two, because there were actually two separate on-chain polls submitted, but we had to axe the first one.
So those should be the first top two polls here, and then in 6 days, one with nobody voting on it. Great. So I'm going to the details for one of these more interesting ones. On the details for this poll, you can see the same thing you see on the executive votes, the uh, technical details, all the text description, all the links to the forums and chats. For ended ones, we have, of course, ended. For the other ones, it says how much time is left, like a countdown. And the most interesting part for polls, we have two main components. The distribution, actually no, not distribution, the evolution of votes per option. This is the number of people voting. For example, here we could see that 5.5 had 15 votes, and the second one would be 7.5 with just a third of that. But you can also see the same thing with the maker state for each one of these options. Now we just figured out we have a little bag here. This is going up to 1500. It should be 10 times bigger because this is actually hitting the ceiling here. It's much bigger. So this is actually the same information, but this is maker and the other one is addresses that are voting with the same result, of course, because we have the two
So
top
quick
options.
question. So
Mhm.
let's say in one of these votes you had maybe some subset of voters, they voted on one option, and then halfway through they decided to switch their votes to a different option. Would that reflect in the graph? Yeah, right, because it's an
Yeah.
on-chain
Yes.
event.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yes, it reflects on supporters for each option, and of course the maker is switched from one option to the other one, so that would be reflected here. Yeah.
Nice. Cool.
And then the third graph shows the amount of voters versus the amount of maker for each one of the options. This is not over time. This is the current or final status of the poll. In this case, this one has ended, so this is the last amount that we registered for it. And this is clearly saying, well, we have a lot of support for 5.5, and we have some support for 7.5, but mostly voters with just a little bit of maker. That's what we have so far. As I mentioned, this is version 1. We just finished working on it. We are, of course, hoping to get a lot of feedback from the community so we can collaborate on it together. We have a open repository for it. You can check out the status of what we are doing, the plans, our roadmap, and even submit issues if you want. That would be super appreciated. And for version 2, we have a lot more exciting things coming. I don't know if you want to have a peek into that or just
Oh,
keep it
definitely.
suspense for a while.
That was my next question. What's in the plans? What's in the pipeline? But hold on. Actually, before
Yeah.
you answer that, in regards to feedback, where's the best place that people can go to give you feedback?
A couple of options. The forums are great for discussion, as always. We can start discussions there and then move things over here.
And by the forums, you mean on forum.makerdao.com on that
Exactly. Yes.
in the wanted section for the governance dashboard, or in the post that Long for Wisdom posted, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Any of
I'm
those
gonna
places
post
should
the link
work.
to
Or
that.
yeah, great.
Perfect. I'll post the link to that in the chat. Cool. And then
Or
yeah,
if you
what's in the
find
pipeline?
like very specific bugs, you can just post an issue here. The repo is open, so anybody can create new tickets here, and we can just chat on the details there. So for version 2, we have a few more charts, both global charts and executive vote charts and polls, some new interpretations of the same data, and some new data we are not processing so far. We have, as I mentioned, help text for everything, so you will know what each thing means here, and also where we get the data from. To provide support for this dashboard, we created a subgraph on the dgraph platform. This processes all the smart contract information and provides a GraphQL API. This is open, so anybody can consume data from it and build any type of application with all the governance data that is available. So we will be posting links to this, and most likely accompanying all the help text from the application, we will provide links to the queries necessary to get the same data for each one of the charts and check the data or do cool stuff with it.
Very cool. Very cool.
We will be working on performance improvements, of course. We know this is a lot of data to process, and sometimes it's not very optimized to see it very quickly. But for now, we prioritize showing accurate data and not always the performance. So that's coming next. The charts will be a bit more interactive. One of the issues that we have, for example, with polls with a lot of different options is that some of them could have options with very little support and others with a lot of support. And what happens is that we need a way to filter the ones that eclipse the smaller ones. So we have a way to zoom in, zoom out. And the last exciting feature, at least for us, is everywhere you have an address for a voter, we will have some details about the voting history for that address.
Oh, that's exciting.
We don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but we know that we want um, to provide that type of information for every voter.
That's actually really, really cool. Yeah, right on. Yeah, this is really impressive stuff, man. I'm totally blown away. I didn't even know about like the view for each in like I didn't realize you guys were pulling in the description and everything because when I was checking out the dashboard, I guess I didn't click hard enough, you know.
Again, we are very excited to collaborate on this and
Yeah,
hope you will share all the feedback you can get and work on it together.
definitely. Thank you, Leo. And if anybody has any questions who's on the call right now, feel free to jump in. Otherwise, I'm gonna say thank you to Leo, and we're gonna jump forward to the rest of the agenda for the call, which is just going over some of the stuff that's going on. All right, right on. Well, let me
Okay.
check the chat. No. Okay, cool. Yeah, thank you, Leo, so much, man. This is really, really great work from you and the team.
Thank you, folks. Thank you very much. Very happy to work on this.
Cheers, man. Cheers. All right, cool. So, uh, so that was the governance analytics dashboard, which is really cool. Can't wait to see the future versions of it. So I'm gonna launch into our usual programming, which is just a recap of some of the stuff that's going on. I'm gonna start off with governance. So governance, a lot of really important things are going on. So it's November 5th, and as you know, we're aiming to have the migration proposal, the migration risk construct proposal passed. Uh, Hopefully, I think it ends in another 6 days, if I'm not mistaken. But we're hoping to launch MCD on the 18th. Well, really the 15th, but then the front ends on the 18th. So yesterday on Monday, governance poll on the migration risk construct was launched, uh, and it went into all of our reasoning for how the risk team set the parameters. And the gist is that as much as we would love to have parameters for CDPs reflect their real risk premiums and their real sort of inherent like risk assessments, the fact that we're going to be going through this migration is going to totally eclipse that. So uh, the migration construct proposes a lot of overly conservative uh, uh, parameters. I actually kind of want to share my screen and just show a few of those parameters and talk about this proposal a little bit in case you guys haven't read it. So here you go. And feel free to like stop me, ask questions. If you have a mic, definitely jump in. So the proposal is gonna basically it's gonna have a couple of CDP types, actually three. Two of them are actual CDPs. Well, actually, all three are actual CDPs, but two of them are the CDPs that are going to be like user facing, meant to be, sorry, not CDPs, vaults. They're meant to be user facing vaults. Whereas the third one, the collateral type single collateral DAI, the Psi CDP, or the Psi vault, is actually the migration contract. So the migration contract is a really, really interesting method of sidestepping public markets to get people to convert their single collateral DAI CDPs to multi collateral DAI CDPs, and likewise to convert their Psi, which is DAI right now, into DAI, which is multi collateral DAI. And so the way it works is that you know the Psi users can directly one for one exchange their Psi for DAI by using this migration contract, which is essentially a CDP, a vault. So you can deposit your Psi and draw against it one for one at a 100% collateralization ratio, DAI. And then what happens is that Psi sitting in this CDP or vault uh, is actually used to close out single collateral CDPs, uh, and then the multi-collateral CDP that is simultaneously opened, the DAI generated is used to basically account for the Psi that was just used to close it. So it's a really cool swap mechanism. It makes total sense, and it helps a lot with reducing the risk of peg slippage on both Psi and Dai during the migration process. So there are like several different risks to consider, which are listed in this proposal. I highly recommend you guys read it. But the gist is that we hope, well, we're aiming to have Psi users migrate faster than CDP users, because CDP users cannot migrate unless there is Psi in the migration contract in that special migration CDP. And so, yeah. Uh, and then just a note on the parameters, right? So for the ETH parameters, they're pretty much the same, 150% liquidation ratio. I'm going to talk about this in a sec. Liquidation penalty stays the same. And the stability fee on it will be the current stability fee in single collateral Dai minus a percent. And the purpose of that is basically to incentivize people to actually move their CDPs and have an open new CDPs on the multi-collateral Dai system rather than single collateral Dai. So that's just a bit of an incentive. The debt ceiling is going to be only 50 million. Auction lot size is 50 ETH. So what this means is that when CDPs are liquidated in multi-collateral Dai, the collateral is actually not directly sold as it is now. It actually goes through an auction mechanism, and the auction sets off once it hits a certain amount. So once there's 50 ETH to be liquidated, that's when the auction starts. So if like a really small CDP with 1 ETH gets liquidated, uh, it's not going to get liquidated right away. It actually has to wait for the whole system to liquidate at least 50 ETH of CDPs before it gets liquidated off. The minimum bid increments is also part of the auction mechanism. It just means that when you're bidding on somebody's collateral, you can only increase your bid, or sorry, you have a minimum bid increase of 3%. And then the bid duration is 10 minutes. I forget exactly what the bid duration is. I think that's actually, I'm not going to speak if I can't remember specifically what it is. Yeah, and then the maximum auction duration is 3 days. So if after 3 days the auction doesn't close, it actually automatically closes and settles for the last bid. And then likewise, dust, I actually can't exactly remember what that parameter is. And then for BAT, for simplicity's sake, it's going to have very much similar parameters to ETH. It's going to have a liquidation ratio of 150%. It's going to have very similar bid increments. All the auction stuff is going to be pretty much the same. The liquidation penalty is going to be the same. The dust is going to be the same. The only real difference is that the debt ceiling is going to be significantly lower, because BAT is, uh, you know, a new asset to the system. 3 million compared to the 50 million that ETH has is just a matter of risk management. And also, it's important to us uh, to propose that at least one other CDP type is launched with multi-collateral Dai, because we do want to test the functionality of having multiple CDP types. And so, yeah, for the system parameters, which are not specifically the CDPs, the DSR is proposed to be set at 2%. The global stability fee is a parameter we can get into later, but it's set at 0% because the overall stability fee per CDP is kind of taking that place. The global debt ceiling is 153 million. And global debt ceiling just means, I think, the debt ceiling between single collateral Dai and multi-collateral Dai. So 53 would be the 53 here. And then the 100 would be the current $100 million debt ceiling for single collateral Dai. The surplus buffer, I don't know if I want to get into this because it is diving into very deep specifics, which, by the way, if you're interested in this, I highly suggest you go and watch or rewatch or read the summary of last week's governance and risk call, and even the week before that, because Cyrus does a couple of really great presentations on a lot of the reasoning behind these parameters. Yeah, so I'm not going to get into the surplus buffer. Let me see if there's any other very specific things I want to point out. Oh yeah, so yeah, I guess, yeah. So if you're interested in any of these, feel free to ask me. But I highly suggest you read through this. It is filled with all of the necessary information, and if you feel that information is missing, definitely reach out and make a point, because this is, after all, a proposal. This is not law until MKR token holders actually accept it through the governance poll. Uh, and so, uh, yeah, I believe the governance poll ends in 6 days, if I'm not mistaken. Just gonna really quickly double check that. Bear with me. Don't want to be spreading misinformation. Yeah, time left 6 days, 2 hours, and 20 minutes. So basically on Monday at, I believe, 4 p.m. UTC, it ends. Yeah, I think so. Well, either way, you can always go on vote.makerdao.com to double check. So along with that, there's an associated forum post that I linked in the agenda. If you're watching the call, a recording of the call, the agenda archive is going to be linked in the description, so you can click on that link and just scroll to November 5th. You'll find that link to that forum post. There's also another governance poll that's going on in parallel for a stability fee adjustment. That one was also launched yesterday on Monday. It ends on November 7th at 4 p.m. UTC, which is right before the Thursday governance and risk call. And MKR token holders have the option of voting between a decrease to 1.5% all the way up to an increase of 9.5%. And the current winning option is 5%. So we're voting on a 0.5% decrease. And I think that's a lot of like latent OCD from the Maker token holders, because I know a lot of people in our community have been uh, really annoyed at the 0.5% at the end of every single percentage for the stability fees for like the last half a year. There's no new executive vote for the stability fee adjustment this week. That's because last week's poll concluded with the 5.5% fee option, which is the current stability fee. So there's no new executive vote. And yeah, that's about it for all the active votes. So the most important thing this week is the migration risk construct proposal. Again, cannot stress this enough. Read it, give us feedback about it. If you see anything obviously wrong with it, please voice your reasoning. So yeah, we posted the summary of the Thursday risk and governance calls. So the risk and governance calls are long and awesome. They usually last for about an hour and a half, and we do everything from transcripts to summaries. And the summaries are really great. They're filled with video anchors, screenshots of the slides. Um, they pretty much bullet point out everything. You could probably get through it in about 15 minutes of reading, 20 minutes of reading, and you could skip around to what you're most interested in. So I highly suggest you, if you're an MKR token holder especially, use those to keep up. They're very good. Another great tool to keep up is our governance at a glance thread, which is maintained by LFW, Long for Wisdom, one of our Rockstar community members. And it also has a bunch of the most recent relevant threads, polls. It has like a little 3-point description of a snapshot of what's going on in governance. So yeah, that's it for governance for this week at least. And we have a lot of other cool stuff that happened in the Maker universe. So for partnerships, we saw Althea and MakerDAO partner for Abuja network powered by Dai. So Althea, it's a system that lets routers pay each other for bandwidth. And it's launching its first network in Africa in early November 2019. They're doing a 15-person pilot. And basically, it's a decentralized ISP solution, an internet service provider solution. It's operated by local people where neighbors resell their bandwidth to their neighbors. And it's creating a distributed network of routers paying each other for bandwidth. So it's a really, really cool idea, really cool pilot. And MakerDAO is helping to supply a lot of the equipment necessary for the pilot. And they're using Dai. So really cool stuff. Another thing in the world of partnerships integrations, there was a post on Reddit. We just released our marketplace in Dai powered game called Skyweaver. So Skyweaver, it's a digital trading card game. built on Ethereum that uses Dai as an in-game currency. And if you want to give it a try, you can go to skyweaver.chat and just ask for a beta code. And it's really cool to see Dai being used in all these new games that are coming out. I think personally, Dai makes a perfect in-game currency because it just makes sense. But yeah, moving on. Another thing we saw is today is the Dai. Together now supports Dai. So Together is another one of these crypto Visa debit cards. But they're also like a financial platform. So they have an app, and you're able to uh, interact with dApps through their app, I believe. So I linked the website for them there if you're interested in exploring them, seeing the details of how their stuff works. I'm not 100% sure if their app is like open source or anything like that. But I'll leave it to you guys to do that research. But yeah, so those are the three main partnerships and integrations we saw this week. A couple of things from the Maker blog. We saw the very, very active discussion and blog post that kicked it off was say goodbye to CDPs and say hello to Maker Vaults. So our product team did a ton of user testing with both people in the crypto community and outside of the crypto community around the terms used for MakerDAO. And CDPs was one of the biggest pain points for newer users. They didn't really understand CDPs, and in testing several options for what to rename them, vaults actually was the most logical one and the most well received one according to our user testing. So if you're interested in reading a little bit more about why we're renaming them vaults, check out the blog post. I also had an extensive conversation with Hasu on Twitter about this and several others. There's a lot of I also created a meme about it, but there's a lot of uh, uh, I guess disagreement and strife around this renaming. But I think that hopefully in hindsight, it'll be seen as a smart decision because ultimately, we're not trying to cater to the small group of people that are using Maker now. We're trying to uh, position Maker and what it offers to be understandable to as wide of an audience as possible, and so that's part of the reasoning behind the renaming. So the other thing from the blog post was test your favorite dApps pre-MCD launch, and so a number of our integrations partners like Argent, Leverage, Status, Omisego, Zerion, uh, they all uh, are they have all integrated one of our MCD Kovan testnet deployments of MCD, and yeah, basically on Kovan you could play with our partners dApps in conjunction with MCD. Uh, if you want more details on it, I'm a little hairy, like a little bit gray on them because I read this blog post like last week or like a few days ago. But definitely check it out if you're interested. That's it for the blog posts. Now I'm gonna launch into community, and before I do that, I'm gonna just pause this up for a second if anybody wants to interrupt me or ask any questions. All right, cool. So, well, actually, before I go into highlights from the community, I know that Maria's tweet asking for questions that might want to be answered on this call managed to get one question. So, a user asked, "What kind of assets do you expect to be accepted by vaults for MCD? Will trust token be accepted? Will other store of value assets like Decred project be accepted? If so, can an asset like Decred be locked up in a vault/CDP while still being able to be staked in the Decred ecosystem?" So with MCD, any new collateral type has to go through uh, MKR governance first. So governance votes on an asset priority list. Uh, there's going to be a more regular cadence for that soon. But then after that happens, the risk team actually does a full-on risk assessment and sometimes even outsources it to other risk professionals in order to best propose the right parameters for any asset. So is Trust Token or Decred going to be one of those assets? Possibly, but I haven't seen any collateral applications from them on our forum, and I also haven't seen uh, any discussion around them in our community. So they are, from what I understand, pretty low priority, but not out of the realm of possibility in the future. Whether or not assets that can be used for staking can be used while they're in CDPs, uh, the likely answer is no. Uh, it's possible, though, technically, that MKR governance can take a staked asset that's put in some sort of wrapper and use that as as collateral. Like, for example, Uniswap liquidity tokens. That's one example of, maybe you're putting up ETH and Dai for a Uniswap ETH Dai pair, and you have liquidity tokens. You could potentially in the future, once MKR governance votes on it, once risk teams assess it, propose parameters, and actually put it into the system. Very possible, yes. So I don't think that there's any technical limitations, but obviously, wrapped tokens include additional risk compared to the underlying assets. So, like, a wrapped ether in a liquidity pool presents more smart contract risk than, for example, ether by itself. And so that's going to be reflected in parameters. So yeah, I hope that answers the question a bit. So yeah, totally within the realm of possibility, and yeah, staked assets have to be very carefully composed and assessed. So yeah, and then highlights from the community. Gonna move into this section now. So I put a little bit of a reminder. If you're a developer playing with Kovan MCD, all of the most recent info for our Kovan deployments can be found at changelog.makerdao.com. And the reason I mentioned that is because on Reddit, I think there were like 3 or 4 different threads of people looking for contract addresses and stuff like that. And all that stuff can be found on changelog.makerdao.com. So if you're a dev, you're playing around, definitely check that out. Highlights from the community. Yeah, the Vault versus CDP discussion on Twitter. I linked Hasu's thread. So me and him had like a 18 reply back and forth on Twitter about arguing about whether Vault is misleading to users. I talked a bit about our motivations from the team side of why Vault actually does make sense. So yeah, definitely check that out. In other news, actually, maybe like an hour before this call, I think we broke the all-time high of total overall Dai supply. So we are now currently at 95.7 million Dai, and the most recent all-time high was, I believe, in April, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was April, but it was 95.5. So we're about 200,000 Dai above the last all-time high. So yeah, pretty cool that that's happening, and it's also very fortunate that we passed the debt ceiling governance poll last week. So on Friday, this coming Friday, the 8th of November, there's going to be a executive vote to raise the debt ceiling by 10 million, I believe. Cool. Developer creations, the Maker Governance Analytics Dashboard, which we did a demo of at the beginning of this call. And then something I found right before this call was the Gitcoin Quest Upgrade or Die. So I'd highly recommend doing this. It's really fun. It's like this retro video game quiz type thing where if you pass, you're able to get a limited edition Dai Kudos NFT sent to the wallet of your choice. So definitely check that out. I am gonna post the link here in the chat for you guys. Yeah, that's about it for developer creations. For articles, there was a really great article submitted on publishox.com, or publish0x.com. It was titled Decentralized Finance, Default Risk, and Loan Over Collateralization. It was a really great piece that I think even beginners would understand when considering risk while doing financial wizardry on DeFi. It talks about lending risk on like secondary lending platforms. It talks about CDP risk, various kind of collateralized loan risks. And so definitely check that out if you're new to the topic and you're trying to learn. It's a really good thread or really good article. For notable threads, there was only one I included, but I only included it because it had like 55 or like 60 upvotes on Reddit. So the guy had a pretty cool T-shirt. It said "Dai is money, ETH is gold, BTC is faith," which is shitting on Bitcoin a little bit. I'm a big Bitcoin fan. I'm chain agnostic. I think all three are awesome. Bitcoin too. And so yeah, apparently a bunch of people on our Reddit really like this shirt. And also, so the reason I actually added it was because the comments in that thread were really interesting. It was a bunch of people talking about the merit of each Dai, ETH, and BTC. So check it out if you're into those kinds of topics and conversations. As for videos, there was one that I saw. Decentralized finance projects like MakerDAO will transform emerging and third world countries. So I only watched like the first 3 minutes of it, so I actually don't know if there's any misinformation in it. But based on the title, it is actually a really great point because one of the largest spreading Dai communities is actually in Buenos Aires, in Argentina. And I know a lot of you guys have watched Mariano Conti's talks, for example. Uh, yeah, it's really amazing what Dai can do to help people trapped, by capital controls and this and that. That'll help them preserve the value that they worked really hard for, and don't let some political risk uh, screw them over. So it's really interesting, really awesome. Also, digital payment systems in general uh, have the potential to totally leapfrog traditional financial technology in emerging economies, which is exciting. So yeah, pretty cool idea for a video. I'm gonna watch it at some point today, hopefully. But yeah, check it out. All right, that's it for all the main community stuff. There are some real life events that I'm going to go through in the last 5 minutes of the call. So for real life events, on tomorrow we have a couple. One in Manila. It's called ADB, Third Finance Forum: The Future of Inclusive Finance. Gustav from BD and Jocelyn from our community team are going to be there. Also tomorrow in Hong Kong, uh, Fenny Wang, one of our legal team members, total rock star, is going to be talking at Hong Kong Blockchain Week main conference. And then on the 7th, again, she's going to be talking at the Hong Kong FinTech Week side event. Uh, and then on November 7th in Toronto, we're going to have Charles St. Louis talking at the Web3 UX Unconference. November 8th in Wuzhen, China, we're going to have Chow talking at the World Blockchain Conference. Also on November 8th in Waterloo, I think Charles is going to be presenting there something, and I think he's also going to be judging. So if you're participating in ETH Waterloo, say hi to Charles for me. He's one of my favorite people, but I say that about everybody. So, but he is a great guy, really awesome guy. November 11th in NYC, we have Brian, who's also on our legal team. I think he's head of legal. I'm not sure. Yeah, he's going to be talking at Fordham Law uh, on their blockchain regulatory symposium. And then also on November 11th in Singapore, uh, a bunch of our team, Jocelyn, Gustav, Soren, who's our head of product, and Du, are going to be at the Singapore FinTech Festival. So yeah, that's about it for the events over this coming week before next Tuesday. Uh, yeah, and with 3 minutes to spare, I just want to thank you guys for being on the call. Hope this was valuable to you all. And yeah, feel free to ask questions. Send me stuff that I might have missed that you want me to mention next week. And also, if you want to come on as a guest and demo something cool or debate or something like that, hit me up. You can reach me on DM pretty much anywhere. My handle is the same everywhere. It's David Utro, UTRO. So hit me up if you have any cool ideas for this call. I'm always looking for ways to make this more fun and more inclusive to everybody. So yeah, thank you all, and see you next Tuesday.
Thanks, David. Good job.
Cheers, Peter.